fresh. Last summer, the governing council started a committee to search for a new president for Hedera. Brett McDowell on the Hedera board served as both the secretary and president. They had to split those roles amongst two people. So Charles became the president of the organization. And president and secretary are two standard roles in any organization. I'm the president of a Canadian corporation, but it's a tiny business. It's like standard stuff. But being a president of Hedera is completely different. And so one of the things that I was most excited about last year was that committee that the governing council set forth to find a president for Hedera. I went to myself, I thought this is the first sign of really deep self-awareness from the governing council that they don't have all the answers and that they need somebody else to come in at the highest level to shake it up. And so this letter that was published, again, by the president of Hedera, I think marks not only the end of an era, but the beginning of a new one. And I want to do a little bit of analysis on the letter because I think that this is probably one of the most important documents we'll have looking back in the history of Hedera. I think that what this letter serves maybe for an analogy is when a rocket goes up to space and then you see that first section of the rocket and it breaks off and it falls back down to Earth. And then that second stage of the rocket ignites and brings it further out into space. I think this letter is kind of the separation of that first stage of the rocket, it feels like to me, because this feels very different. And I want to do a bit of analysis of this letter. And the first thing that I want to kind of analyze I responded with, I redid the Lehman video with Charles just because I thought, it's time. Here's the thing. Here's the reality real quick. Lehman's at Swirlds Labs. He's on his computer. He's doing hard math. Lehman's doing what we want him to be doing. Lehman's being left alone and he's doing math. That's what created Hashgraph. And, that's what is going to create the next best stuff. That's what created the DRAC. So Lehman doing math is great. And so I don't see, in this new era, I don't see Lehman as being like the spokesperson for Hedera, to be honest. We have NFT projects that reference Lehman and there's Lehman's face everywhere and he's emojis on Discord servers everywhere. And I do think that that is going to stay around, but I think that there's a difference between the founder of a network and the face of a network. And the reality is that Lehman's not like a Web3 crypto guy. Like, sure, he knows cryptography and he knows artificial intelligence and he's a genius. He's like a computer science mathematician, super smart guy that invented this thing that makes all this possible. So, but when we talk about the face of an organization, what we're talking about is someone that interfaces with the market. The market is pretty crazy, right? The crypto industry is kind of wild. And we have to have someone that both understands the enterprise side, right? Charles worked at the Federal Reserve and all sorts of different enterprises, but also understands the marketing side and understands the crypto side, right? Charles has worked at major networks and done marketing at like Nike and Disney and stuff. So it's like, Charles is somebody that I think can be the face of the network. And I've held off on saying that a little bit, but I do think so. And that's why I kind of swapped out Lehman. It's like no disrespect to Lehman at all, but I think it's time to move on. I think it's time to really kind of look at who is interfacing and communicating with the people keeping this thing alive, right? We're not just talking about, look at Charles coming down, saying hi to the kids, playing with all the little doodads here. No, it's like Charles is speaking to the people keeping his organization alive, right? Retail pays the bills. And so this article here I want to do an analysis on it. So my first bit of analysis is, I think, something that a lot of people haven't picked up on, which is the most important thing. And this comes from a marketer's perspective. The most important thing about this letter that Charles published isn't what's said in the letter, but it's how it was published, right? This could have very easily been a blog post on the Hedera website. It could have easily been like a press release, PR newswire, whatever. It could have been some kind of scripted interview with some media partner, bullshit, show or whatever that is paid to talk nicely about Hedera. It could have easily been any of those things. It could have been a Zoom webinar, some kind of fake Q&A. It could have been any of those things, but it wasn't. It also could have been an article published by Hedera, by the governing council, but it wasn't. What it was a post made by a guy. And to me, it's more important about how this article was published than what's in it, because it's about reading in between the lines. And that's what I read into this. And I go, this is very fresh. And this is a very new approach for Hedera that is in line with the industry. Successful networks, if you kind of A/B Hedera against, let's take Solana, right? When Solana has a kind of to the heart community update, it'll be published by an individual or a person in like some kind of thread. When Hedera has something like that, it's always, again, some kind of like BS news article or PR newswire thing or blog post or some kind of like other like weird boomer thing. But this right here is the first time that I've seen Hedera at this level play the game. And that's what it's about, is it's about person to person, building connection. And it's written in a way that isn't like, it doesn't read like some kind of weird amalgamated, edited thing. It's like, of course it's been edited and reviewed by legal and stuff, but it reads like a human being wrote it, right? And we've seen the post by Charles. We've seen him talk. It sounds like him. And so that's my first observation as I analyze this, is like, I don't want people to miss that about this, is it's not just about what's said. It's about the way that it's published and the way that it's said. That's the most important thing. Now, I want to talk about a few points in the article and kind of talk about them. So the first is, and I'm just going to what I've done is I've taken bits of it and I've got some quotes, and what I want to do is I want to just kind of comment on some of these key sections. So the first is, Charles writes, "The challenges we face as a decentralized ecosystem are significant, but I view this as a real opportunity for a reset of Hedera's thinking, way of working, and way of being seen by the industry." So that's a big thing. Yeah, Shady H Barbarian, like and retweet. Let's get some more folks in here. But that's the first thing. And what that tells me is that it's pretty clear, wrapping this whole thing, is they want to move into a new era, or at least Charles does. The next thing that he kind of has in this piece is, the feedback from the community has truly informed and shaped a lot of the new ideas and structures we are currently working to create and implement. So again, what that tells me is that the community has more power than it thinks. I mean, I've said this a few times before, but that kind of lays it out for me, right? That kind of lays it out, and I'll just share kind of the quotes on my screen here. But right, that's the key thing here. The feedback from the community has truly informed and shaped a lot of new ideas. And that's that's not a super strong way of putting it, but that's basically saying like the community has, some power. He goes on again and he says, we acknowledge that recent events and systemic inefficiencies caused by legacy structures have led to concerns about transparency, accountability, and the strategic direction and competitiveness of the Hedera ecosystem. And right there, that's the heart of it. Can Hedera be competitive? Rob Allen mentions this. Hedera needs to be fit for purpose. So that's what it's about. Can Hedera be competitive? Charles continues, and again, these are just snippets from his article that I think are most important. I've received a ton of valuable feedback from our community, highlighting several areas where we need to improve, some of which I also identified early on in my tenure here. So again, what this tells me, again, reading between the lines, is Charles is the right man for the job because he's like-minded with the community, right? What that says to me is, okay, sorry if that was loud. I usually mute my mic before I open it. Cheers. What that tells me is that out the box, Charles is much more aligned with the retail ecosystem and community. And also too, like it reminds me of Rob Allen, right? Rob Allen, a governing council member, is, at Australian Payments Plus. He's been at the foundation. He's been at the association. He's been around the block, but he started out in like a Telegram group buying HBAR. So there are these people, like, again, I know that I rail on this show all the time about like, oh, they're disconnected and they're enterprise or whatever. But like, it has to be said that like there are a lot of people at the top in leadership at the governing council that are clued in, that are incredible, that get it, that use the products on the network, that use Hashpack and Saucer Swap and Blade and Kabila and, Bonzo Finance and like all these things. They're in there. They're trying stuff out. There are those people, but there's not enough. And the leader at the top sets the culture for the organization. And knowing now that we have somebody on the level at the top to set a new culture, that makes me super bullish. Continuing on here, and again, these are just snippets. While many in the Hedera community understand what decentralization means, sometimes we hear requests for Hedera to do something that Hedera itself cannot do, and instead is only within the control of a different organization and its board. So this, I think, was one of the most important things that Charles mentioned, which was a reminder, I think, to a lot of people, which is we're saying like, Hedera, you got to do this. You got to stop this. You got to stop this from happening. You got to fix this. And what Charles is saying is like, we literally can't, right? A lot of these initiatives and organizations have been spun out of Hedera. We have no control over them by design. That's decentralization, for better or for worse. So you want decentralization, you got it. And again, arguments can be made all through there, but that's kind of what Charles is saying, is like, he's making it clear to the Hedera ecosystem that there are literally just things that Hedera cannot do, that it does not have control over, which I think is super important for us to understand. He continues, Hedera plans to take steps to work more closely with ecosystem partners to deliver greater transparency and accountability within the ecosystem more broadly. There wasn't a lot, like one topic that's talked about a lot in this community is like, we need more say, we need a seat on the council or whatever, all these types of things. And so I wish that this post from Charles could go a little more into maybe some tangible examples or ideas about how that could be done. It didn't, so that was a little disappointing, but the intention's clear. So that's good enough for me for now, but it would be good to kind of get a better idea of like, okay, what are those steps? What are those tools? What are those systems? But continuing on, this I think was something that jumped out at me hugely. This jumped out at me massively. While Hedera does not and cannot control independent organizations within the ecosystem, We have every right to express when we do not agree with particular decisions or behaviors, and we may speak up in the future. So that, to me, I read that and I was like, because it says a few things. What it's saying is, right, as he outlined previous, is like, hey, we can't control some stuff. We can't make some things happen. But he's making it clear that they have every right to speak up and express when they don't agree with stuff. So what does that mean? What does that look like in practice? I don't know. What he's describing is Hedera sharing criticism against actors in the ecosystem, or entities or projects or organizations in the ecosystem. That's, I guess, what he's referring to. Beyond that, I don't really know. I don't want to speculate, but it's essentially the president of the organization saying, listen, we have the ability to do these things and we may speak up more in the future. Again, reading in between the lines says to me that his original draft was probably different than that, and legal was probably like, hey, we need to lighten the language on this. And so this is what we get. But clearly there is a indication here that Hedera, we haven't really seen them do this before, but we may see a Hedera that disagrees publicly with certain things. And we haven't really seen that before. Hedera has really been in a phase of like support, be super conservative with what they say, nothing, never talk negatively about stuff happening in the ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it would be a very, I wouldn't say shocking, but a very stark change for Hedera to voice dissent or objection or criticism in the ecosystem against something. So that to me was very interesting. He continues on. We are currently in the process of exploring ways in which interested companies and possibly individuals who do not meet governing council requirements can participate in some of our newly formed working groups and innovation summits. Right? This initiative, which has been in the works for a couple of months. So again, you start to think like, okay, stuff's been happening. It's being led by our membership committee co-chairs, aims to allow more opportunities for community participation and feedback. They hope to have it finalized and announced soon. So no timeline provided, but clearly, again, the community being heard. So again, I think a very important thing that I would love to have more tangible, more kind of actionable information, but it is what it is. This was, I think, for me, my favorite part of the letter. And again, talking about reading in between the lines, I think what this kind of section I pulled from the letter does is it speaks to the character of Charles. And quite frankly, I haven't seen this kind of vibe from people in leadership often, not just in Hedera, but in general. He says, there are some matters that I told the community on X or Twitter that I would look into, and then found those issues to be more nuanced and complex than I initially assumed, which left you all hanging for answers. And for that, I take responsibility and apologize. So again, a little disappointing for sure, but when we look at the character of these organizations, when we look at the question of what type of culture is Charles going to create in Hedera going forward, there is definitely a culture of accountability, and that starts with Charles himself holding himself accountable. And I think this is him holding himself accountable, because I do think that was a big disappointment for the community of having Charles say, I want to fix this, that, and this, and just not doing it, and just being honest and saying, although my intentions of providing timely information were sincere, my ability to do so in a multi-layered and decentralized ecosystem is thus far proved untenable. So honesty, accountability. If we want to see that in the ecosystem, it's got to start with the guy at the top. I was a little surprised that this was included. I think that traditionally this can be viewed as weak. I think that traditionally in the enterprise world, this type of stuff can appear to be a chink in the armor or weak, right? But in the Web3 world, in the decentralized world, in the crypto world, and in the eyes and ears of people keeping this thing alive, retail, I think that this is the exact opposite of weakness. This is a strength. I think that holding yourself accountable, being transparent, admitting to mistakes is important. So yeah, sure. It's definitely disappointing and a misstep on Charles' part, but this could have easily just not been included. But I do want to just very much highlight this as a testament to his character. And I think the culture that will be cultivated in Hedera going forward, a culture of self-accountability. He continues on. We are also further strengthening Hedera's market integrity policy, and to help enforce the policy, I saw the enforce word and I was like, oh, okay. Recently signed an agreement with a compliance and market integrity provider that will alert us to suspicious activity within employee wallets. So this kind of like, I was reading this and I was like, whoa, like, because I know that there's been a lot of speculation about selling patterns of employees at folks in the ecosystem or whatever it is. Like, I know, like, I don't want to mention anything specifically. It's just for years, there's been constant stuff like that. And we've always relied on trust in leadership at Hedera. And I think that what this is saying is like, we can't really rely on that. We have to rely on professionals, third parties to enforce this at the organizational level. And to me, I was kind of surprised. Again, there was a lot of surprising things in this article, but this was one of the major ones, which was, specifically mentioning employee wallets. Yeah, there's a couple things in here that I'm pretty shocked by in a good way. Continuing on, he says, going forward, our marketing efforts will also showcase high visibility and updated content that will resonate with Web3 developers, users, and enthusiasts. He talked about marketing in the letter. To be honest, it was a bit underwhelming for me. I mean, if we were to poll the Hedera community and say, like, what's the weakest link in the Hedera ecosystem? What is the biggest weakness of Hedera? And everyone would say, like, marketing. So I was surprised in not a good way about how little of the letter talked about marketing, but I can understand that from a organizational standpoint, it does feel like there's more important things happening. And I do think that there are a lot of things happening that are very important that we just don't know about. So that's the sense I get, but I mean, would have liked to, see more about marketing. This, I think, again, was very important to know. I will be starting a president's blog, hell yeah, that is regularly updated to talk openly, and then in brackets, within guidelines to protect market integrity and confidentiality. Again, this is a big sticking point. I do think that the Hedera legal is too big at Hedera. I do think that as an organization, like policy and legal stuff, it's too early for like that much of it. I do think it's a lot of red tape. So I don't know why there hasn't been anything like this before. I do think this is a big push probably. So a president's blog would be great just to know what's going on. Where are the meeting minutes? Last episode I was whining about meeting minutes not being published. Let's actually see if they're published yet. Let's take a look. Hedera meeting minutes. Let's take a look. Transparent governance. Nope. So again, yeah, we don't have minutes, but I'll take a blog. The blog will be about what he's working on, what Hedera is working on, and the changes in progress. This would be awesome. Like, please, for God's sake, please do something. This would be great. On top of that, I'm also going to begin hosting a regular cadence of X Spaces and LinkedIn Lives to invite builders and community members to participate in. Oh my God, like breath of fresh air. If this doesn't happen, I'm going to lose my mind. But this seems really great. President's blog and Spaces, all these types of things. This is Hedera doing the basics finally. What every other network is doing. This is so good. Like this right here, we need this desperately. And then in my mind, I went like, but is this going to happen? When is it going to happen? I was kind of like, yeah, sure, dude. But it's specifically stated here that schedule is being worked on now, and I should be releasing that within the next 3 weeks. So before the end of the month, this month, we should have, or to be fair, maybe like till the first week of August. But anyways, in the next, 15, 20 some odd days, we should have this. So let's hold Charles to it. This would be fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So please, let's start communicating more. Let's start building the transparency. I love this. But wrapping up my analysis on this is what I think is if there was a single sentence, let me try to frame this, how important this part is. There's a part of this article that's so important. I'll tell you how important it is once I get all my brain cells working. One sec. Okay. If this article that Charles published was one sentence, and it was this sentence I'm about to read, I'd still be happy with it. That's how important this sentence is. And this is what he says. He says, I'm grateful for the messages I've received conveying your trust, as well as the ones that were painful to receive, as they have lit some fires in the areas that needed to be lit. Let me read that again. I'm grateful for the messages I've received in conveying your trust, as well as the ones that were painful to receive, as they have lit some fires in the areas that needed to be lit. For me, that I think really summed it up for me. And again, let's read in between the lines here. What Charles is saying is that there are definitely fires that have been lit, and we know that not all this is like peaceful, everyone kind of coming together and solving problems. There's definitely a lot of like unnecessary noise and freakouts and negativity and all sorts of stuff. But kind of to what Charles is talking about is some of the signal here he's saying is needed to be done. And this is why I kind of am so bullish on this community is I think that what he's referring to is some of this work could not be accomplished by Hedera or anybody else than this community. Charles wouldn't be able to do his job, right? That's what he's saying. He's saying that there were fires that needed to be lit. There were things that needed to be exposed, and it was painful, but he couldn't do that. Nobody could do that except the Hedera community. And so I think that it's a call for us to take a pause for a minute and kind of go, we're on to something here. We really are. I think I've said this a long time that the most underutilized resource in the whole crypto industry is the Hedera community. And this is the leader of this organization, of this network, saying, you're doing important work that I can't do. And so I think that a lot of the different arguing and noise and negativity and stuff, I think we could, definitely do without it. But I think that the stuff that's happening, we talk about the letter being sent to the governing council. We talk about, Brandon, the HBAR Bull's thoughts on staking, the community coming together. analysis being done, detective work being done, conversations happening, people doing the shows, communicating the information, people building, all this kind of stuff, right? It's not just retail pays the bills, but Hedera is a retail network. I think that's what we're all realizing is it doesn't matter how many times Hedera or anybody says that this is an enterprise network. It's not. It doesn't matter how many Fortune 500 logos are on the governing council or how many enterprise people are on the meeting minutes. It doesn't matter. Hedera is a retail network. And it's a retail network because it is, right? Until it's not. And it's a retail network because, again, retail pays the bills. It's how Hedera stays alive. It's why do people come to the Hedera ecosystem? It's not generally because of the enterprise stuff. It's because of retail applications. It's because of the people. It's because of the community. That's what we hear. That's the truth. And so that's why that sentence was so important to me. And I guess, really wrapping it up on this is I think sure, there's a lot of very interesting stuff that I think we're going to continue unpacking in this letter from Charles. But again, it's about how it was published. It's about seeing Charles kind of step in as the face of the network, in a new era beginning, right? I mean, recent episode of the show I called The End of an Era because it definitely felt like an era of Hedera was ending. And now we're starting to see signs of potentially a new era beginning. And if there's going to be a president's blog and regular live streams and spaces, then, and it says it's going to happen in weeks, that's a massive change. It might seem stupid, but it's a massive change. And I think that this document from Charles is going to be a very important one for the history of the lore of Hedera, HBAR, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, I have to agree, Mr. Best. Charles is a good CEO. Let him do his job. He's not a CEO. He's the president of Hedera. So just reminder, there is no CEO at Hedera. It's just the president. Hedera doesn't have a CEO. But yeah, I think we will be happy 6 to 12 months from now. I mean, the reality is that we got to be happy now. There are things that can be done right now to make people happy. One of those things is increasing staking. Another one of those things is more support for initiatives like Wallet Connect, easier ways for builders to get grants, all these types of things. So there are things to be done now. And it's not about reinventing the wheel or doing a bunch of new stuff. It's like, look around at other networks that are thriving in ways that Hedera is not. There are things that you can do right now. And the issue is that Hedera just moves too slow. And I think Charles' article also hits at that. It's like, Hedera's slow. We need to move faster. So that's what it's about.